Who here has heard of the paradox of tolerance? A few people. The paradox of tolerance is a philosophical concept suggesting that if a society extends tolerance to those who are intolerant, it risks enabling the eventual dominance of intolerance, thereby undermining the very principle of tolerance. Those of you who are familiar perhaps started seeing a bunch of memes screenshotting the Wikipedia page proliferating on the internet a few months ago. I understood why it was suddenly becoming a talking point, but what surprised me was the sense I got that this was a new concept to people. As someone raised Unitarian Universalist, I feel like I have spent most of my life grappling with questions such as how to be open-minded towards closed-mindedness, or how to respect the inherent worth and dignity of someone like Adolf Hitler. These two questions are linked, but have, importantly, very different answers. Let's start with the former, this question of the limits of tolerance or open-mindedness, and whether the existence of those limits is hypocritical. It is a rather intellectual question, as inherent to the term open-minded. Can one consider other thoughts? In his explanation of the paradox of tolerance, philosopher Karl Popper notes that we should not suppress intolerant philosophies that can be countered with rational argument. We all have bad ideas sometimes, but when we are open to rational discussion of them, we are often able to see that for ourselves and change our minds. However, Popper says that we must claim the right to suppress those intolerant ideas that refuse to engage with reason. I think Popper is generally right, but I'm discomfited by his dependence on reason, in part because it offers no way forward when you are without the power to define what is acceptable in the public discourse. And rational arguments go nowhere because the ideas being expressed are not rooted in reason. The dictionary definition of tolerance is 1, the ability or willingness to tolerate something, in particular, the existence of opinions or behavior that one does not necessarily agree with. Or 2, the capacity to endure continued subjection to something, especially a drug, transplant, antigen, or environmental conditions, without adverse reactions. The first is a value, the latter a limitation. It is, in fact, impossible to endure continuous subjection to that which directly threatens who you are without adverse reaction. Perhaps tolerance, then, is an appropriate word for considering how much BS you can put up with, but not for conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which have the power to transform without destroying. That is, the reaction is not adverse. The use of words, of course, changes over time. I grew up in an age of teaching tolerance, the idea of promoting diversity and inclusion by increasing our capacity to accept difference. Notably, the project Teaching Tolerance changed its name to Learning for Justice in 2021. The differences in mind in this education were not of ideology and political beliefs, but of race, cultural origin, and sexuality. Who people are, not necessarily what they think, though notably that education was limited in not fully recognizing that who people are shapes how we think. The Welcoming Congregation program pushed Unitarian Universalist congregations to think beyond tolerance, which many queer people said implied that, well, we'll put up with the presence of gay people, to push past that to acceptance and radical welcome. Which finally gets us to the question of, what do we mean by welcome? I think it is important that we think about this in the context of religion in America. where countless queer and trans people have been told that they are sinners and will suffer in this life and beyond for their desires and self-expression. People with this experience know what it is to be unwelcome, ostracized, alienated, and abandoned by family, community, and a certain conception of God. Many reject religion altogether, while others find their way into liberal religious congregations such as our own, where they can explore their faith, be in community, and be accepted for who they are. This is one of the ministries that Unitarian Universalism, writ large, offers our world. Unitarians and Universalists have always been on the leading edge of liberal religion in America, since even before the days of our muddy friend Hosea. Many mainline Christian denominations today hold theologies that were once radically forwarded by Unitarians and Universalists and decried by their mainline peers. But for a powerful example of what all are welcome, a phrase seen in front of many churches, means in a 21st century American context, I want to consider mainline Christian churches and the practice of Eucharist or communion. The practice of this ritual defines membership in the corporate body of Christ within these communities. By participating in this shared ritual of bread and wine, those who can participate define who is the corporate community body of God. Now, I can't tell you what exactly membership means in those congregations, though if you want to learn more about membership at FUUSE, please join our first Path to Membership session after the service today. What I do know is that in some traditions and congregations, one must go through certain rituals and processes of the church in order to participate in communion. For example, the Catholic Church says that only baptized Catholics may partake of communion, though anyone can attend Mass. There are many Protestant churches that welcome any baptized Christians to participate, or more broadly, I've heard, anyone who has accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. The intention may be welcoming, not necessarily welcoming to all. My personal favorite are those congregations that say simply, all are welcome at God's table. Although our religious forebears did have practices of communion, we don't presently practice it with bread and wine here. Yet I would like to imagine that we land on the side of welcoming all to our table. Certainly, we pride ourselves on our lack of dogma or creed. You do not have to conform to a system of beliefs about God in order to join our church or participate in community life. But that doesn't, in fact, mean that you can be a Unitarian Universalist and believe anything you want. We are non-creedal, but we are covenantal. Your beliefs are your own, but your behavior is bound by community. We are here because we think there is something valuable to being with people who understand and interact with the world in different ways from us, whose respective faith journeys and practices can enrich our own understanding of why we are here. We believe there is no one right path to truth or to God, if there even is a God. But because we value theological diversity, we also have to commit to behavior that respects diversity, behavior that allows us to create space where differences are recognized and celebrated, where conflict can be addressed honestly and with care, where we are intentional about creating systems that allow marginalized voices to be heard, so that we can all grow. Which means we don't have to tolerate bigotry, at least not here, That doesn't mean it won't show up, that white supremacy and patriarchy aren't actually well enshrined in this institution. It does mean we must establish limits, define boundaries, create processes that help us to stay in the struggle until love wins. And we do that by welcoming all, judging them not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. But then what do we do about those whose character we judge to be morally reprehensible? How can one respect the inherent worth and dignity of someone whose beliefs and actions directly threaten the well-being of you and those you love? To start, how does one respect the inherent worth and dignity of anyone? Any ideas?
To listen.
To listen, all right. That's one way. Compassion. Patience. Understanding. Put yourself in their shoes. They might not fit. Curiosity, love. All right. I think one way it starts is by respecting yourself, not letting people walk over you, believing that you have something valuable to contribute, believing that others are capable of treating you with the respect that you deserve, even if they are not acting that way in the moment. From there, you can get to believing that people who are doing wrong are capable of doing better. And you can help by calling them in and setting boundaries that give them the explicit invitation to do just that. When I was meeting with the staff and Barbara to think about this service, she brought in Moby Dick, a book I have never read and can't speak on. But apparently it connects to Jonah, which is a more familiar story to me. So you've got this guy, God says, you need to go tell those people in Nineveh that if they don't change their ways, then I'm going to destroy their city. And Jonah, he goes and he runs away because he does not want to deal with those terrible people. And then he ends up in the belly of a giant fish, and then he prays and God releases him and he makes him, and Jonah goes and he tells. It's actually a really, really short book in the Bible. I just read it last night to refresh my memory. But when Jonah fled instead of preaching truth to power in Nineveh, he was failing to love the people of Nineveh, refusing to call them in so that they might change their evil ways. He was too, scared of them, threatened, didn't want to deal with them. But when we let injustice stand because we are too scared, we are not being open-minded or compassionate. Rather, we are damning ourselves along with those we despise. It is here that I find myself firmly a universalist in the tradition of Ballou. And you may or may not find alignment with my theology. That's fine. I am a universalist not in the sense of believing everyone will go to heaven. My concern is not with an afterlife. But I am a universalist in that I believe that everyone is born innately good and worthy. And while life presents us all with situations where we compromise ourselves, we are all capable of redemption. Universal salvation is not a promise, but a potential. No matter who you are or what you have done, though some do have a lot more repair work to do than others. The possibility of repair is anything but a carte blanche invitation to do whatever you want, to espouse hate or take advantage of systems and people. To protect what is sacred here, there are limits on our behaviors, and we ask that anyone who joins us to consent to abiding by those limits. Some of that is common sense, and a lot of it would benefit from being more clearly articulated. But anyone who wants to sit quietly in a service, chit-chat over coffee or not, volunteer and donate to make this congregation run, is welcome. And everyone, no matter how long you have been at FUUSE or been a UU, no matter how much our ideologies and perspectives are aligned, is capable of harm and of healing. In our litany earlier, Barbara read, "No matter how fractured we are or once were, we can make whole people of ourselves. We are whole at our core because of the great, unnameable, sometimes inconceivable love in which we live." To which we responded, "No one is outside the circle of love." May we cultivate that circle at FUUSE and in the world at large through our insistence in celebrating difference, our commitment to facing conflict with repair, and our willingness to set boundaries to protect that which we love. May we call in those who further injustice with conviction and with care. May we work to be a place of welcome for all who need our faith.